All right, everyone. I'm really excited to be joined today by Nathan of Rose Edibles. And I was hoping, Nathan, you could just take a second, say hello to the listeners of Bite Me, and let everyone know what it is that you do.
Hello, everybody listening to Bite Me. My name is Nathan Cozzolino, and I am one of the founding partners of Rose Los Angeles, an edible company now based out of San Francisco, California.
Great. Now, I've been really interested in your brand for quite some time. I love what you're doing. So I'm really glad that we can talk about this today. What is it that drew you to edibles in the first place?
Um, the opportunity to change the way that they are most often made, at least like the ones that are commercially available. I saw an opportunity to address an issue with quality. um, and we just started tinkering away and tried to figure out how to get good quality foods into commercially available cannabis edibles.
Right. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was so intrigued by your brand because you are doing something quite different. Are you a big consumer of edibles, generally speaking?
No, I never was, and I think that's also what drew me to it. I wanted to create a bridge there for all those people who had had bad edible experiences or were curious about edibles, but there weren't any available that spoke to their sensibilities. So, we tried to figure out what people, what populations of people were curious about edibles, but who weren't being addressed with what edibles there were to choose from in the consumer packaged good cannabis edible space.
Right. And what did you find when it came to who was curious about edibles? I'm curious about that myself.
I think people like edibles offer an interesting opportunity to change your state, your psychological, physical, mental state, um, and to do it with like a fairly low commitment to recovery.
Mhm.
I think that's why edibles have uh, replaced some percentage of alcohol use. The recovery time is much different. Obviously, I have a story with stage 3 cancer in my 20s. Cannabis was a very helpful tool during that time for me personally, and was like part of my like daily health routine just to stay feeling okay,
Mhm.
despite everything that was like going on medically with me at that time. So I thought edibles offered this opportunity for people to feel good and not feel bad after, as long as it was trustworthy and approachable. And that's a lot of companies targeted that reliable dosing, like scientifically tested this and that. We wanted to go further and provide reliable sourcing, trustworthy sourcing. We wanted to like clear up a lot of the communication between the um, manufacturers and the brands and the consumers that supported these operations, not just for the sake of cannabis and an edible company in the cannabis space, but just from our experience with marketing, we wanted to embark on a new relationship between brand and customer. And part of that was just to create a trusting relationship between the two, so that when somebody saw a name or trademark, there was a good reason to trust that brand. And we thought this would create the type of brand loyalty that would ultimately be the foundation and support for such a lofty idea as Rose.
And do you find that you have a lot of people who are just kind of curious coming to cannabis via edibles like the ones that you're making?
I think so. I think so much of the market right now is dominated by extreme dosing.
Mhm.
In California right now, like the top sellers are the 100 milligram per single serving edibles, and those are flying. And after sitting in retail stores across the state myself, doing demos for Rose over the course of the last few years, I understand why that is. And um, that's not what we've spent our time on figuring out. Rose has put zero time into figuring out how to make a 100 milligram version of our products. Not that we don't think that that would be interesting, but we've just been trying to figure out how to produce like a more nuanced effect for our users, um,
Right.
the consumers that are trying Rose. So like people who don't know what their THC tolerance is, we wanted to give them an opportunity to be able to incrementally control their dose and find what works for them. Also, because everybody or the majority of the people on our team are very THC sensitive. Our chef is THC sensitive. My partner, our creative director, is THC sensitive. I'm THC sensitive, and I've been working in the industry for 20 years. And it's weird because people who have been around it for so long and have been um, frequently using cannabis are the ones that have built up a tolerance, or so many people think. But the longer I spend working with cannabis, the more sensitive I become for some reason. I don't know what sort of buildup is going on my receptors, or if I've just like fine tuned my endocannabinoid system to be more perceptive and sensitive to cannabis. But we wanted to create a lower dose offering that was like both the most interesting culinary experience we could provide and the most interesting cannabis experience we can provide in one edible.
Right, and you mentioned the extreme dosing, which is interesting because I do find that the extreme dosing or the really high dose edibles are for a particular user, and I've been using edibles for a long time. I'd consider myself sensitive to THC as well, even though I've been using it pretty well off and on for longer than I care to admit. And you also mentioned the alcohol piece, how the Canna Curious and otherwise are using edibles and beverages and whatnot in replacement of alcohol. And that's something I've talked a lot about with people on this show. And so edibles really do create this unique opportunity for people to sort of experiment and dip their toes in and just enjoy life. Now, Rose is sort of based on the Turkish delight format. Is that my correct understanding?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That was the jumping off point. We wanted to use traditional Turkish delight as the format.
So what is it about the Turkish delight that drew you to the edibles experience in particular versus say gummies or chocolates or the more normal things you would see in the cannabis edibles market?
Um, it was a blank canvas. We could do anything. With a potato starch base, there was really an opportunity to work with just about any ingredient we could think of. So it was kind of like just like free jazz experimentation in the kitchen, and yeah, it really just opened opened up this opportunity for our chef and the chefs that we work with to go very broad and experiment with ingredients from all over the place, different farms from around the world, and there was nothing holding us back. I think you could do that with just about any gummy format, but um, yeah, we have a lot of flexibility because of the potato starch base that we work with.
So it was the blank canvas that drew you to it. Do you have any tips for making Turkish delight? Because I tried recently and it was a disaster. It did not turn out at all. So, I mean, I know you're working with world renowned chefs, but for a home cook, is Turkish delight a little more difficult to make than a regular confectionery candy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like it requires a lot of experimentation, and the obviously like the chemistry and setting point is always going to like be a little bit more tricky. If I was doing something in home, I would probably do something like more in the world of a pâte de fruits, something pectin based that you like would have an easy time with on a confectionery cut or parchment in a sheet tray. I think that might be a little easier without more legitimate uh, proper kitchen equipment.
Right. Okay. Well, that's good to know. I've made pâte de fruits before, and that did turn out. So maybe it's just I should leave the Turkish delight to the people who know what they're doing.
Well,
I've
and
always,
also to be honest, like
yeah,
one of the attractions, like pâte de fruits, you can't. That's hard to travel with. You can't take it to a concert and have it in your pocket, or else it kind of constitutes back to jam.
right.
So so that was one of the motivations. We were like, what formula could we produce? We're in California. We have hot summers in a lot of the areas in our state. What formula could we work with? What like base recipe could we work with that had good shelf stability and resistance against heat, higher heats? And that potato starch based gummy was like natural. We didn't have to incorporate weird stabilizers. We could use all natural ingredients, and it had a higher resistance to heat than any other formula we were playing with at that time. So that was another thing that attracted to us, because many of the gummies that were available at the time were presenting challenges for the teams that were selling them. You'd open up a tin of, you know, like X brand gummy, and it would just be a pool of what it was before.
Right. I've had that experience myself. And then you're again back to guessing, like, how much am I going to consume? I mean, you can kind of guess if it's in a package of gummies, but it certainly makes that individual dosing element a non-point at that instance when they've all melted together. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, you have
Now,
to dose with
you,
a straw.
right now, you've mentioned I've seen on the website that you use flower rosin, single strain flower rosin, to infuse these edibles. Can you talk a bit more about that and the process and the thought behind single strain flower?
Yeah, I came from a procurement and cultivation background. In my 20s, all through cancer, I was cultivating in a six light room in San Francisco. Prior to that, I was up in the Emerald Triangle, bouncing around from farms from summer to summer, working growing full term sun grown flower. I am very connected to the experience of sitting with a strain in a turkey bag on your lap and inhaling the fragrance of that flower. And that's an important part of my interaction with cannabis. To swap that for a mason jar of distillate wasn't an attractive opportunity, even if it meant cutting infusion costs. When we announced that we were going to launch a flower rosin edible that would be commercially available, everybody's response was that was a ridiculous thing to think to do. Flour was so expensive, it would never be viable. It wouldn't be scalable. We could only do it cottage industry level. And the alternative was like unattractive solvent-based extracts that I wasn't drawn to. Not that I don't think there's a time and a place or a consumer for those. Obviously, there is, because more of those have sold in California than any other type of edible. Um, but I just wanted I wanted the elimination of heavy machinery, chemical solvents. I wanted to use the highest quality flour and turn that into an extract using the least amount of process to get from point A to point B. I wanted to smell the terpenes in the parchment. Um, I just like the simplicity of something fresh pressed.
Right.
And I think the chefs that we've worked with who have stopped by our kitchen also have like had some sort of positive visceral experience while we've been pressing for their recipes when they've come in. And so, yeah, for me to take a mandarin cherry lime dog from our farm, put it in a 35 micron bag, full big ripe buds that are cured for 10 to 14 days, press out a rosin that has a really beautiful color and aroma and texture, and to spread open the parchment that the rosin was squeezed into and like smell that like gooey, tacky rosin, and have it smell like exactly the way the flower did on, while it was still with roots in the soil. That's what I love, and that's what we want to transfer into the edibles that we're producing.
And that sounds absolutely beautiful when you describe it that way. Now, for those listeners who are out there who aren't super familiar with the term rosin, can you just take a second to quickly explain what rosin
Yeah.
is?
Yeah, flower rosin is the least sophisticated form of extract you can cook with, like short of finger hash or keef or cold water bubble hash. You take a flower, like I said, you cure it to let the moisture drop to a point where it's pressable. If you press it with too much moisture, you squeeze out that water and you have watery rosin. And you put it in that nylon bag. 35 micron allows the trike heads to pass through. It's a pretty refined rosin. There are larger micron bags that push out more material, but then you get more of the fats and lipids, which aren't a bad thing. But we do try to limit it to more of the plant's oils and trichome heads and less of the chlorophyll stuff.
Mhm.
And you squeeze it out. You wrap it in parchment and you squeeze it out, and the golden yellowy rosin that presses through the 35 micron bag is what flower rosin is. The
Right.
difference between flower rosin and hash rosin is hash rosin. You go through a traditional hash making process where you either fresh freeze the product, or you can use cured flour. You muddle it. You go through a process, muddle it in a nice water bucket. You go through a process of filtration, and then you use that hash to then press into what's called a hash rosin or a live rosin. And the only difference is we don't work with fresh frozen. We work with cured flour.
Mhm.
Um, the reason why people work with fresh frozen is to preserve more of the terpene profile. I think you can preserve plenty of the terpene profile by using a flower rosin extraction method, especially considering when you're working with a gummy, you're reaching heats above 200 degrees in order for it to set. And so, I think it's a marketing term that brands like to use, where they say, "Hey, using live rosin because it preserves terpenes." It did preserve terpenes until you cooked it into an edible, and then you
Right.
lost all your terpenes.
Right.
If you're doing a low heat recipe like a chocolate or something, then that's a brilliant extract to use. I think it's a perfect use of fresh frozen extract. If you're doing anything that uses higher heats, then it's unnecessary.
Right. And you mentioned earlier too about how more of the candies on the market or edibles on the market are probably more distillate based and they sell more. But is that just because they're more widely available than say a live rosin edible that's out there?
There's like a price point sweet spot in the California retail space. We were really limited by that, and the response in California was, "Hey, adapt your product to be more scalable and economical." So put it in a Mylar bag instead of like a Italian color plan craft paper box. Um, you know, just like take away the hand touches. Each one of our 20 cubes is hand situated into the box because they're not equal sides.
Mm,
So there's probably 20 times that we're touching our product between when we cook it and when it's finally packaged. Maybe more, maybe like upwards of 30 touch points for a box of Rose Delights. And you cannot sell them at the retail level for a price that you're going to sell in really high volume. You need to have a closer relationship with the customer and clear communications to get them to understand what the difference is between this and this. And California is so cluttered with um, products right now, and that I think many people that walk into stores in California are overwhelmed,
right.
and they just want to get something and get out of there.
Mhm.
It's too much noise visually. So we've transitioned recently to a very heavy D2C model where we sell our product on our website, and that's that's changed things for us. It allows us to maintain the quality of inputs and the attention to sourcing that we've always used. It allows us to pay farmers fairly for their produce. It allows us to preserve like all of our methods for cultivating and producing flower rosin extract for our recipes. It just enabled us to do Rose Delights the way we wanted to do Rose Delights. Whereas if we were sticking to a wholesale model in California, um, retail buyers would have like stayed persistent with telling us to bring price down at any cost
Right.
because it didn't matter because people would buy it anyways. And quality has been the motivation since the beginning, and without that as the the target, we don't know what to strive for. We're trying to get better every time we make a box of Rose Delights, and we're continually trying to yeah, to just contribute to the evolution of quality in the cannabis space. how can we make a better quality product so people can have a better experience. It's all kind of built around the experience of the end user. And so working backwards from that, it requires very close attention to each little detail of what you're putting in it and how you're working with those ingredients.
And I definitely think you're achieving that because here I am a podcaster based in Canada. And of course, I do have a particular interest in edibles, but I've been very interested in your brand and what you're doing and how you're doing these all these little attention to detail along the way. And it really does stand out. And markets here in Canada too are very saturated with all kinds of edibles that, aren't particularly interesting. They'll do the job, but they're not necessarily particularly exciting in a lot of those ways. It's just pretty basic, which is one reason why I like to make my own as well. But one of the big pieces of what I've seen you doing is that you're collaborating with world-renowned chefs to create these edibles in the various flavors. Because as I understand it, you have a new, is it a new drop, I guess, every season with a
Yeah,
chef?
it's every inspiration. It's
Okay.
every time we have a conversation with somebody that leads to the development of a new idea is when we take it to market. So, um, I think we're constantly overwhelmed with the activity, like on that side of our business. But there's like a lot of really interesting creative people who uh, you know we end up in conversations with, and then all of a sudden we're like, what if this? And then that sets us down a 2 month path of developing a recipe and putting time and energy, which ends up becoming the story that becomes a part of like the visual identity of that one product.
Right.
So it's really made it interesting for us. I think the manufacturing process of a consumer packaged good can quickly start to feel very uninspired and mundane. And there's so many. Our kitchen's colorful. There's so many things passing through our kitchen every day. Yesterday I was there. They were processing chokeberries. They had strawberries come in the day before. Um, what's been elephant heart plums, pluots. Just every day is something new. We're receiving tart cherries for a new sleep recipe that's rich in naturally occurring melatonin. Um, all the time. It's like whatever produce comes in is what we're processing. It's what we're eating while we're processing. It's just keeps things changing and keeps us with the challenge of a moving target instead of just producing the same recipe over and over again. So I think everybody's having a good time in our kitchen most of the time.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of space for creativity. And does that mean that you're never really making the same thing twice almost?
We do have recipes that we're making again and again. There's our like evergreen recipes, like the mulberry recipe in our deep sleep, the green juice, the fresh pressed green juice, which is our high energy recipe. There is a chino strawberry recipe, which is our single milligram recipe, and a California keep mango from the Coachella Valley. And those are the ones that stick around. But we only we had 1,400 pounds of mangoes arrive 2 weeks ago. We spent the week pureeing, and then we will freeze that puree. We capture it at peak seasonality, and then are able to thaw and cook throughout the year.
Mhm.
The recipes that use fresh, never frozen, are the seasonal recipes that were what you just referred to, are seasonal drops that
Right.
seem to be happening about like 6 to 10 times a year now.
Okay. Oh, wow. So quite a few times. Now, how do you choose the chefs that you're working with on these collaborations?
Never. We never really target anybody. It's usually something that just kind of comes together organically. That's how it happened with Dominique. We brought. She's Dominique Crenn is she was always like the culinary star of San Francisco. She had a restaurant, Atelier Crenn, in the marina. I had eaten there and had one of the fanciest dinners of my life 10 years ago. And I saw on social media that she was being treated for cancer at UCSF, which is where I was treated for cancer. And I thought, since, I'm like, oh, this person's like, uh, you know, a star, and she's a star in my eyes. And I'm like, maybe she'd like to try our edibles. So one day I went over to her restaurant and left her a little care package of delights while she was in treatment. I didn't know her. She didn't know us. And she started commenting on our posts after that. And apparently she began eating them. And during COVID, we connected online and started a conversation. And she said, hey, my wife and I love your products. Could I do a recipe? And we're like, you absolutely could do a recipe. And she was growing apples on her property up in Sonoma County at that time. And she's like, let's do an apple, a fresh pressed apple and passion fruit, and both sourced locally. And we rented an apple press and we ordered passion fruits and scooped out all the pulp and blended those two things together. And that was our second chef collaboration. First was Nicole Rucker with an apricot lemon verbena. And then Dominique connected us to Manu Bufara, who did a blueberry caipirinha recipe. After a traditional Brazilian cocktail, swapping in blueberry to have like a fresh muddled fruit. Um, Virgilio Martinez from Peru was the third collaboration. He did. We took these Shinano Smile grapes and cold steeped ginger and pink peppercorn overnight, and made a recipe called Magical Grapes using his recipe. Simultaneously, Enrique Olvera had a Rose Delight at a party in Mexico City somehow. He reached out. We did 3 recipes with him: a like holiday ponche, Mexican holiday punch, with a hachia persimmons as a base, and then we did a mezcal poached pear with an ancho chili coating. Those were his 2 first recipes. And then, the rest is history. Like 3 or 4 years since like those recipes happened, we've collaborated with a dozen or so other chefs from around the world who have really kind of opened our eyes up and pushed us to the way we look at what's possible with cannabis edibles. And I think thanks to the contributions of those people that we've worked with over the years, we've also like just created a conversation in the cannabis space, or contributed to a conversation about what is possible. I think we've helped kind of fuel the spirit of collaboration in the space, because other brands have seen like what can come from it, and how exciting and engaging and fun for the people who are consuming these products it can be. And then also just ingredients. Our motivation early on was to create a closed loop edible where we took responsibility for the cultivation of a lot of the ingredients used, from flower to fruit to other produce. And then we also supported a network of local farms around us. We thought like an investment in agriculture, in healthy, sustainable agriculture, was imperative, because without healthy soil, you don't have a viable cannabis industry.
Right.
And when everybody's pulling plants out of the ground and going into 3-gallon plastic pots, and using salt-based nutrients and conventional industrial methods of cultivation, and that's not, we don't see much of a future in that. And so we're like, how to kind of reverse engineer what cannabis cultivation has become, and take it back to very like simple methods of production, and traditional methods of production. So yeah, we are all about simplicity and traditional methodology.
And there's so many things I want to say about all the things you touched on just there. But when it comes to the ingredients, I mean, obviously that stands out so much, because normally you go into a dispensary and I'm presented with, blueberry or raspberry or blackberry or whatever the combinations are. And what you're describing sounds so amazing. And I've seen pictures on your Instagram of how these edibles look as well at the finished product, and they're beautiful to look at as well. And it just goes to show how the gift of an edible can really say so much to somebody, and lead to interesting collaborations down the road. Now, you also touched on obviously ingredients are really important. Can you talk a bit more about how you're going about sourcing some of these ingredients? Because you mentioned sort of a closed loop system.
Yeah, it's a small network of farms. You go to 3 farmers markets around within 10 miles of San Francisco, and you've met everybody, in California who's producing on a smaller scale and sometimes a larger scale. So, it began with me going to the Ferry Building Farmers Market and the Berkeley Farmers Market and sourcing Frog Hollow Farm peaches from Farmer Al at Frog Hollow, Albion strawberries from Dirty Gold Produce, um, uh, um, blueberries from Triple Star, just any recipe that we were going to my friend's house in Oakland because the teacher of his daughter had a lemon verbena bush that we could harvest some leaves from. Um, yeah, it's funny. The fruit kind of like takes you on the journey and it becomes part of the story. Recently we're working on a recipe with a chef in Connecticut, and his idea was aronia berries, and we were like, "What's aronia berry?" We don't have it on the West Coast. We're flying to his place to cook it. Normally, we use produce that's only a car drive away. That's
Mhm.
like kind of been a fundamental rule for us is like if we can't get in our car and drive and pick it up, then we should find another ingredient to work with. But sometimes we'll make an exception. Um, so yeah, every time a chef has an idea for a recipe, it begins the hunt. Nicole Rucker recently in Los Angeles was like, "Hey, I want to do like a sour apple with a fig leaf coating, and just make it really like tart and sour." That night, I was at the market buying ingredients, groceries for dinner, and I saw this little Mutsu apple from Brisa Ranch. I'd never seen them before. It was this little tiny green. It looked like it like mouth puckering, just like from the appearance. And I text Nicole a pic, and she's like, "That's it." So we connect with Brisa Ranch the next day. They have fig trees. They're willing to harvest leaves for us. They are also willing to deliver apples, and then we're like off to cooking.
And
Um,
I noticed as well that you're listing a lot of the farms that you're working with right on your website as well.
that's right. That we started that early on. Sorry, helicopter flying over.
Yeah.
Uh, we started that early on to call out to farmers because that's the work we're really impressed by. In cannabis, the cultivation of the flower has always been required the most dedication. It's the hardest job in cannabis for the last 50, 60 years of cannabis in California. The people that are living remotely, keeping like difficult working hours, sweating throughout the summers. It's hard physical labor, and you produce something really beautiful. So, the task of producing it isn't easy or romantic, but you end up with this like really pristine, beautiful finished product. And the same thing with all of the farmers that are producing the produce that we're working with. So I think I personally believe that like they're the stars of the recipes. It's not the chefs we're working with. Those are the thinkers, and they have amazing creative ideas. Um, everybody's the star, but really the farmers deserve the spotlight, at least for
Right.
that moment on the box, for the work that they put in. It's also like can be like a pretty grueling, thankless profession at times. And you know, uh, my partner one time said, she's like, God, farming like really deserves to be regarded as sexy. And like there needs to be this like revolution where people like discover a respect for the amount of energy and attention and hard work that goes in to farming to produce like tasty things to sustain life. And
Mhm.
um, yeah, anytime we can give the farmers props for the work that they put in and what they're able to provide us, we attempt to do that. It's
Right.
a good opportunity to bring people into art. I guess that's the other piece is it's bringing people into the world of what went on to create this edible. And so that's a huge part of the experience. The procurement of the flower and the produce, the fruit that goes into it is what we're living day to day. And before you take a sip of a glass of wine, if somebody gives you like a little bit of the background about that sip, it's going to change what you experience and like what comes alive on your taste buds. And similarly, it's like if people understand where those fig leaves originated, and where those elephant heart plums started, and the fact that we're using like one of the only available California mangoes, and the passion fruit, and the Ojai grown Valencia orange, all of a sudden it kind of gives you a sense of place, and I think that helps color like what you taste, and it's important storytelling.
Yes, I totally agree. And it's also clear the quality and the sustainability is really, really important to Rose. Can you talk a little bit about the zero waste packaging? Because you mentioned earlier that you could use Mylar bags, or people have recommended it to you to sort of cut costs, but you have opted for something different.
Yeah, so we actually do use a Mylar bag. We're not zero waste packaging. I wish we were. It's something to aspire to. We're lower waste packaging, I would
Hmm.
say. It still is, our packaging still is pretty consumptive, and it's like something that there's two factors, like child safety
Right.
and the initiative to use more sustainable, um, I guess, just responsible materials. So, our primary packaging, the box that we sell our product in, we produce that locally. It's through a small family print shop. We've worked with them since the beginning. And we love the fact that it comes in a paper box. We're very like funny with the type of paper we use, the foil and embossing. If you were talking to the creative on our team, he would tell you that, yeah, like all of that's a big piece of the storytelling. Um,
Mhm.
so it all starts there. The texture and the materials is like that like kind of kick off of visual communication, and each step of the process of unboxing is like the story unfolding. The recipes on the inner tray before you lift it up,
Oh,
and
cool.
yeah, and you reveal a piece of parchment that lines the delights. The delights have an outer coating. That's an opportunity to play with different recipes and ingredients. Like I said, with the smoky ancho chili powder, or Kalima celery salt, or yuzu zest and green peppercorn. There's a lot of opportunities to play with different stuff there. And then, yeah, the like hand situated tray of delights. So um, materials and packaging is a big like part of what we do as well. That is the story. Um, and people, the customers that have been purchasing delights for the 5 years that we've been making them, we've received DMs on Instagram of people that have like hung up every box that they've purchased.
Right.
It's almost like a collecting card or something like that. And I have the same. I have a drawer of like past boxes that I really loved, or recipes that are fond memories for me. I guess that's the goal each time, is to produce a recipe that is that next opportunity for us, an experience, a production experience that we want to remember. Be like, oh, remember, like we'll recall recipes from 2 years ago that we haven't thought of in 2 years. Like, oh my God, that was so amazing. And remember that trip to that farm to pick up this and that flower that we cultivated. Like, what happened to that seed? Let's grow it again this year. And it's yeah, all part of history.
Yeah, and I mean, what a testimonial to have people who have had the opportunity to enjoy these edibles send you pictures of their collection of boxes as well. I mean, that says a lot too about the experience that they're enjoying when they open a box of your edibles. So there's that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And my partner Scott Berry does a really like amazing job on designing the packaging as well. It's so they're always like pretty fun and playful, and do a good job of communicating what's inside.
Right. Now, switching gears a little bit, I understand you have a partnership with the Last Prisoner Project, and I wondered if you could talk about that for a few minutes.
We haven't caught up with them in a while. We started with the Last Prisoner Project, and they connected us to a brand that was it was an expunged. Uh, I don't want to say. I was a person who was serving time for a cannabis offense. I think he'd been in prison 7 years, and he was expunged by the Trump administration. He got out, and with his longtime friend, they started this brand 40 Tons. And basically, there was in our space, mostly people who are launching brands, they'll make financial contributions to organizations. It's kind of like the rite of passage to be operating in the cannabis space in California. And we've always been a brand that's been operating with very little capital, but I would say um, we've we've gained a lot of experience in the last like 20 years of working with cannabis, and so we kind of created this relationship with these guys and this brand, where we were consulting with them on a weekly basis and kind of walking. They were taking us along on their through their process of launching a brand, and we were advising, sharing experiences, sharing resources, just trying to contribute in any way we can to help streamline the process of getting product to market,
Mhm.
which can be like costly and like sort of wasteful of resources. And we were just trying to help them expedite and make that process most efficient. So it was like a little, I guess you could say, incubator program for a budding brand, that's now doing great. I wouldn't say any thanks to us necessarily, but we were able to be with those guys and like during the formative days. And that's the work that we did with Last Prisoner Project. There was one other brand, I believe, called 87 now. Um, and I think 87 is the amount of months that the founder spent in prison for cannabis charges.
Mm.
And just did like a small amount of advising. It's work that we really like doing, and we should probably find more opportunities to get involved and do that. But in all honesty, it's been a little while since we've connected with that group. It's probably time to reach back out.
Right. Well, perhaps this is your little nudge right here, but
Yeah, yes, perfect. Thank
I
you.
mean, it sounds as though, I mean, collaboration is a huge part of your brand generally, like from start to finish. And I think that's so beautiful because that's such a wonderful example to set in the world and just sort of a way to conduct yourself in your personal life and in business. In what ways do you see the cannabis or the edibles industry evolving in the future? And how do you see Rose being a part of that or being at the forefront?
I don't know. I like there's so much industry everywhere you look, and there's so many like opportunities for consumers. I think Rose like is like a like I don't know. I hope Rose can lend our experience and expertise to more DIY opportunities for the people interested in what we do. One day we would like to put together a book that
Oh,
brings brings together all of these experience and recipes and ideas from people who have contributed to what Rose is, to provide people with information, recipes, and inspiration to like do some of this stuff on their own, whether it's attempt to make a Turkish delight at home, or use some of these cultivation methods and kitchen processes to develop something that's more home friendly. Um, and yeah, for Rose, it's been the challenge to put in a little bit of extra work to take responsibility for the production of what we consume as a business. And longer term, I hope that that's our contribution to this industry, to the people that put their like money towards sustaining the people that make up this industry, the brands, founders, projects that make up this industry, um, that we, equip those people with the information and resources we need to bark on, some amount of the experience that we've lived, whether it's in their home garden and in their home kitchen, or whether they want to like start to produce something that they can sell at farmers markets. I think if edibles could be sold at farmers markets, it'd be an amazing experience. If I
I
could go down
agree.
like 10 years ago before we started Rose, if I could go down to the farmer's market and buy a cannabis edible that was like made by the same person who, cultivated the apples, that would be like a very like nice experience to live. So I hope, yeah, I hope it kind of like, Rose took something that was all about like science and industry, and we made it more about like kitchen and agriculture. And I hope it can go further and then like sort of like devolve in a way all the way back into home kitchens. That doesn't help us as a business, but if more people thought that way, I think it'd help us as a society. So
Right. Well,
uh,
I think it would help you as a business as well, because at the end of the day, if I make my own Turkish delight in the kitchen, if it turns out it might taste all right, but it's never gonna look as beautiful as what you and Rose is producing. So there's that.
yeah, some balance, somewhere between that and that is, I think, like where we wanna land.
Right.
But yeah, less just like longer term, less industrial, less conversations of infinite scalability,
Right.
more like thoughts in regards to how we can like invest and preserve our natural resources, and yeah, healthy, like truly healthy lifestyle.
Right.
I don't, I think I know that Rose Delights provide a lot of relief. They do for me, and I've heard over the years that they have also for a lot of people. I also I don't like the idea that uh, our physical mental well being is something that we can that we can improve through consumer purchases. I think like ultimately, if it's something we can take responsibility for and make happen ourselves, it's the healthiest way to like achieve the end goal. So I think like Rose's offerings have like been kind of built around that. It's like how can we emulate that? How can we provide somebody with a consumer packaged good experience that is as close to homemade as we possibly can and has that sense of like love and finishing touches that one would experience if they were served something by a friend in their home. And
Right.
so how to make it more personal and intimate like that.
Right. Well, I think the success of your business obviously shows that a lot of people think the way that you do. And so, yeah, if I was in the States, I would definitely be seeking out your edibles. Now, just a couple more questions before I let you go today, Nathan, because I know you're a busy man, but what would surprise people about you?
Oh, surprise people about me. I mean, maybe the thing that I said earlier that I'm an extreme lightweight when it comes to edibles. My sweet spot is 1 milligram.
Oh, wow.
Um, Perhaps what would surprise people is I'm not a chef. I'm not the one in the kitchen. If our chef and production team stepped away and I had to start making Rose Delights tomorrow, I don't think I could do it.
Right.
I think yeah, I'm like more of I don't know. I think I provide inspiration to the team capable of doing that. Like
Right.
that makes up Rose. Um, and perhaps that I live in San Francisco, despite the fact that our company's name is Rose Los Angeles, which is where we started, but not where we produce today. We moved
Right.
our kitchen to San Francisco.
And I guess the last question is, where can people find your edibles? Now, you mentioned earlier that DWC, and for those listening who weren't familiar with, or I think it was DWC, was it direct to consumer?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, you have a website, which I'll link to in the show notes, that people can find their edibles. But where can they buy them in store? Or is it just
Yeah,
online?
yeah, online primarily at roselosangeles.com, and then also in a variety of retailers around the country.
Perfect. Well, I will be sure to link to all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much today, Nathan, for taking the time out of your busy schedule. Sit down with me and talk about the beauty of your edibles. I really appreciate it.
So happy to connect, and thank you all for listening.
Yeah, thank you.